Hey, nature photographers. I'm up here in Bozeman, Montana, finally getting to hang out with my friend Eric Rock, OM System Ambassador. Eric lives in Bozeman, Montana with his wife Melissa. Both of them are photography workshop instructors. Eric is just a good hearted guy. He's got a ton of photographic experience. He's going to share with us some of his tips, techniques, philosophies, and information about shooting in snowy conditions. We had a great hike, enjoyed photographing some American dippers and beautiful landscape scenes. So I hope you enjoy this week's video. So let's get going. Hey, nature photographers. I'm Lee Hoy, OM System Ambassador, photography workshop instructor for Wildside Nature Tours and Precision Camera and Video, and contributing author for the Journal of Wildlife Photography. Here we go.
So Eric, what I want to know is, you live up here in Bozeman, Montana. You get to photograph in the winter a lot. I'm jealous, I'm envious. But what a lot of people who don't get to shoot in the snow a lot, they get there and they struggle. So what are some of the most important tips you would tell people when it comes to photographing in the snow?
Well, the first thing I'd tell them is to make sure they get out and enjoy it. You know, that's a great time of year. You shouldn't be stuck at home unless maybe you have an editing deadline or something, but otherwise get out and enjoy it. I try to apply the same guidelines I do for doing landscape and wildlife photography the rest of the year, except I go prepared. I think we could talk a little bit about your last YouTube where you talked about getting dressed and being out in the wild in the wintertime, and this, pretty much have to agree with that. That's all about getting ready, not only yourself, but your gear too. Pack it, carry it, keep yourself warm, carry some extra gloves, some mittens just in case you need them, a warmer hat, but get out.
What do you think about, like you were talking to me earlier, you know, would you rather people be slightly cold or slightly warm? What do you think is most important?
Well, I think it's better to have enough equipment, enough gear, enough clothing to be extra warm. You can always peel off a layer or carry it along with you if you're too warm, but if you get cold, you don't have another layer, you're kind of stuck there. So I always try to take extra.
What do you see? What mistakes do you see when people are out here photographing in the cold, whether it be regarding exposure, gear? What are things you go, oh, if only they knew?
Well, a lot of times extremities, you know, not wearing heavy enough boots, for instance. You know, it's a lot of people don't like heavy boots. It feels like it wears them out early. They just don't like putting them on, getting them off, but wearing the appropriate footwear. Also for traction too. On a day like today, you know, we could easily get into a place where it's really slippery. You want some extra traction. You might want to slip on some cleats. I'm carrying a couple of pairs in my pack right now just in case we get into that situation. And then, of course, mittens and gloves and they're going to work for you for photography. Glove liners are nice because a lot of times you can handle your camera, handle your gear, your lenses, equipment through glove liners where you couldn't with a full size mitt or glove on.
Yeah.
So, and it's very easy for your hands to cool off once you take them outside of that mitt. Just like now with this breeze coming down, if I had my hands completely out, they'd chill off relatively quickly.
You know, one thing I noticed about several of the pairs of boots you have at home and the one you have on now, they have a nice feature at the top. Tell everybody what that is.
Oh, it's just a gather at the top to keep snow from going down in. So if I get off trail and I'm deeper in snow, I don't have to worry about that snow getting down in, melting, making my feet wet, and thus my feet getting cold. If I don't have that gather in my boot like that, I'll often wear gaiters, which are kind of like leggings that snap around the bottom of your boot and then come halfway up your leg and then gather at the top. A great way to keep your snow from going down into your footwear.
Yeah, those boots you have there, it's like a built-in gaiter at the top where it cinches. I like that design. I don't have a pair like that, and I think for some lighter weight winter stuff, I may look at a pair. I noticed you had Baffins, and your traction's been really good. They seem to be real comfortable. You're quite maneuverable. You went off trail a minute ago. You know, when you want mobility plus warmth, they seem to be working pretty well for you, don't they?
Yeah, they work really well. And they're also comfortable for sitting around in a vehicle while you're waiting to get out or traveling from one place to the other. But if it's going to be a long drive, you've got the heater on, I'd rather wear a light pair of shoes and then put those on when you get there. That way your feet aren't sweated up by the time you get there.
Yeah, that's a good tip. That's
a
good tip.
You get that moisture in your footwear. Is that if you start getting cold, we're going to feel it first.
Awesome. So Eric, how long have you been shooting OM System cameras?
Oh boy, that's a good question. I started early on dabbling in it, and then I realized once a couple of lenses came out, a couple of particular lenses, especially the 40 to 150, that I really didn't need to be shooting any other gear at that point. So I've been I started dabbling more than 10 years ago, but I really got into it and exclusively shooting Olympus probably about 7 years ago.
And when you, what are some of the features on the bodies that, and in terms of, you know, you're a nature photographer overall. You've got quite a few genres that you shoot in. What are the features that stand out to you that said, oh, this was really what got me super fired up about being an OM system shooter and an ambassador?
Oh, computational applications for sure, but you know, I especially love working with an electronic viewfinder, something we didn't have back in that DSLR days, to be able to see exactly what you're getting. And Olympus knows how to play to that, or OM Systems has known how to play to that with providing all the pertinent information you need in a bright, usable viewfinder. But especially even now with the OM1, it's kind of like an industry-leading viewfinder for Micro Four Thirds and computational applications like what the hell were we talking about?
Lightning, storms.
Yeah, there are times, and it was what the hell was the mode we were using? I mean, seriously.
Live composite.
Yeah, see,
I may leave this in. We'll see.
No. And the gimbal isn't working now. I'm not working. So there might be times where I like to be out and photographing storms rolling through with the chance of catching some lightning. And live comp is an amazing opportunity, you know, built right into the camera where you can watch the exposure happening, capture as many bolts of lightning in that scene, and then stop the exposure when you're ready. You know, something we didn't have before when we're photographing storms or photographing lightning. If somebody chooses to, it's great computational photography for, say, things like star trails. Also, if you're doing maybe carnival type stuff, it's great for fireworks, things like that. Any type of festival, you can use, you know, the live comp. So,
yeah, is that probably your top computational feature that you use the most, or?
Oh no, I would say for landscape, I like using the live neutral density. You know,
Yeah.
that's a lot of fun. Not to have to worry about, you know, screwing a filter on, taking it off all the time to get the shot you want. Slow down the sky, maybe get a little bit of cloud movement, get the water movement over rocks, over a waterfall. But yeah, love being able to just, you know, go into the menu, turn that on, and start shooting.
I'm curious, do you have any, I'm sure you use the custom modes, right? Do you
Yes.
program your custom modes?
Yes.
Have you ever programmed live neutral density filter to a button?
No,
No?
I've thought about it. You know, I've got room to do that for
Yeah,
sure, but
yeah.
I've always found it easy enough to go in and
To go
switch
into
it
the
because
menu?
it's so early on in the menu system. Yeah, I kind of park my menu. I park my menu right in that area, so it's very easy to get to. But that's an excellent way to do it if
Yeah.
you shoot a lot of landscapes for sure.
Since I don't use exposure compensation, I shoot manual all the time, so I program my exposure compensation button for live neutral density filter for landscapes. I can just pop it on, spin the rear dial, and get to the one. But for a lot of people, I always like hearing how people use buttons differently because
Yes.
that's part of the power, you know, of the
Yeah,
one system,
I was
right?
just gonna
So
say,
what
yeah.
are a couple of buttons that you change for you?
You know, not too much. Just back button focus, and you know that's my primary go-to as far as any change in button. Turning off the shutter button for autofocus, and then moving it to the back. But what you said, you know, I love the ability to program that camera any way you want to. That was like, wow, this is a great way of thinking. And that was one of the things that started moving me over in the direction of Olympus and into OM Systems. Is just being able to say, you know, has to be the most adaptable camera system anybody's ever made.
Yeah.
And it still applies.
Still that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Eric, while you're shooting there, when you can, because I know you're probably doing some slow shutter speed stuff, why don't you tell the folks a little bit like what you're looking at this scene using your OM system camera, your gear. What is it you're looking for at a scene like this? How are you framing images? What shutter speed you using? Why are you shooting what you're shooting? I think that's what a lot of people would really like to know from an OM system ambassador who travels the world. You shoot all different kinds of things. What are you looking at? What are you thinking?
Ah, so you want my secrets, do you? Well, actually, I try to keep things as simple as possible. When I walk into a landscape scene, a little bit different than shooting wildlife or maybe cultural documentary or something, but when I walk into a landscape scene, there are two ways to look at it. But the first thing I'll try to find is what catches my eye. And I'll try to compose around that. Let's start from what I call the additive side of things. In this situation, what catches my eye, we've got this down log with a little bit of snow on it. And we've got the frozen waterfall around it with the beautiful patterns. So what I'm gonna do if I'm using the additive technique is I'm gonna focus in, zoom in, maybe compose with the log and some supportive elements to it. And then as I go along, I might start adding more to the scene, tilting my lens down a little bit, maybe trying to get some of the moving water down here. and adding a little bit more to one side or another, adding more as I go until all of a sudden I feel like the scene is losing its impact. That's the way I'll look at a scene. What catches my eye first? And that's, I think, really one of the easiest things for people to learn right off the bat is when you step up, what's really the most powerful element in the scene that you have, and then zoom in on that, hone in on that, and just start recomposing as you add new elements or supporting elements to it. When you start getting to the point that, maybe the scene has lost its impact, then you've probably gone a little bit too far. You can do that while you're there, or you could do that later. As long as you capture everything around it, you can always do that later when you're sitting at home with a nice cup of tea or coffee, or later on in the evening with maybe a glass of wine. You could sit and say, where does it start to fall apart? So that's the additive way. The other way is I might walk into a scene, depending on my mood on the day, and then try to just pull up, capture the whole scene, and then start narrowing it down, zooming in, recomposing, where I start taking away some of the supportive elements, some of the trees on the side. Maybe I don't need as much sky, maybe I don't need as much water or foreground, and then eventually working my way into that strongest element by subtracting away from the scene. So which one I choose usually depends on my mood when I walk into a scene. Lately I've caught myself using the additive method more than the subtractive. And along with that, I look for things like some of the normal things you would think about as far as compositional elements. Is there a leading line in here? Is there something that maybe gives the scene some pattern? Obviously, in this particular scene, one of the strong elements are the patterns of the ice, the frozen water, the ice coming down off this rock wall behind it. So I'll look for patterns, textures, things like that to add to a scene. And that might be actually one of the elements that originally catches my eye. But in this case, the strong element that caught my eye was the log leaning down across the frozen waterfall here.
I like that tip, additive and subtractive. I like how you worded that. I've never really thought about it like that. But that's a great tip for folks. I like that.
Yeah. I use that a lot on my landscape workshops. And at first it seems a little awkward, but once you get the hang of it, it really gives you a way to work a scene really well. And nowadays, having the electronic viewfinders, having the ability to use some of the special computational modes, like just now I was using some of that live neutral density to slow down my exposure a little bit, get some of the water moving to create that softness against the ice, or softness in front of the ice here. So I have to tell you that, digital photography has made photography a lot more fun for me, and shooting the OM gear has made it that much more fun. It really has. Then that's really the first thing you should be looking at when you come out here. This is beautiful, isn't it?
This is awesome, man. What perfect timing, huh?
I agree.
Great tips, man. Great tips. All right, Eric, I want you to share with me one or more, like a photographic experience that really stands out. It was special, or you captured an amazing image, and how your OM system gear really helped you do that.
I'd have to say, because of the ability to travel light and travel pretty well contained from the elements with the weather sealing on the Olympus camera, bear photography, rainforest bear photography, British Columbia, working up and down a particular river. I used to guide bear trips. To get to a spot on the river, you have to be maneuverable. You have to, work your way through the forest, sometimes over some pretty rough terrain. And then you get down to the river, and that's when the skies just cut loose. It's pouring down rain. I can easily and comfortably pull my camera up and start shooting. Anybody that's with me that doesn't have OM gear is going to be worried about what's going on with the weather. I'm not going to pull my camera out in this, risk of damaging it for the rest of the trip. And so a lot of people either fussing with putting some type of rain cover on their camera at that time, or they're keeping their camera gear secured back in their camera bag somewhere, and they're not getting the shots. And trust me, I love weather. I love putting weather in my scenery. I love putting weather in my wildlife shots. That's atmosphere. And that's a whole nother element that you can bring people into your images with. And I think it almost always adds power to an image. Whether you're photographing bears or you're photographing, a river landscape. You put weather in there, would be snow, rain, and it just adds that much more to it.
Yeah, I agree. I often find that when we get challenging climatic conditions, people quit photographing right when the moment gets great, doesn't it?
My favorite time. My favorite time to be out there. And that's also when I feel alive, too. You know, I used to say when I did nature trips, it's like, if you come back and you're cold, you're wet, you're muddy, you've had an experience. That's a big part of it. And if you can take your camera along, hey, all the better. And honestly, that's one of the best things about the OM Systems gear is, man, it puts up with a lot more than what most people will, let alone what cameras will.
That's true. That's
Yeah.
true. Cool.
Yeah.
All right, bud. Thanks, man. Eric, one thing I always wonder about is what motivates people in their photography. What is your philosophy of nature photography? What motivates you? What drives you? What are the thoughts, the experiences, your ethics, whatever it might be that goes into your philosophy of nature photography?
Oh, well, if I can maybe approach that from a different angle. A
Sure.
lot of times when I'm out leading tours or doing workshops, I have people who aren't necessarily involved in that tour or workshop. They might come by or, be close by at a particular scene and they'll say, hey, oh, that's nice you guys are photographing, but you know what? I like when I travel and I go places, I don't like to have a camera between myself and where I'm at or the experience. And, for me, I find it, in most photographers, I think, find it just the opposite. That, having that camera in your hand allows you to go a little bit deeper into that experience, it allows you to kind of extract the details from the scene. It allows you to concentrate on certain things. Like earlier today, you and I were out photographing we were photographing an ouzel or an American dipper, and through our lens we could see all the subtle movements in that bird, see what he's picking out of the water, where he's going, how he's working back and forth through the current. And just standing back and watching it, yeah, I think I could appreciate that. But by looking through my telephoto lens and watching every little nuance of his movement, every time he'd flick his eyes open or close, going into the water, coming out of the water, the way the water fell off his feathers, that to me was really added to the experience. It allows me to get more out of an experience. And then I also have something, if I'm doing it right, I've got something to take home and look at it and experience it later.
Yeah, I've heard people say they don't want to take pictures because they feel like it's detracting from the experience. But what I like, I'm like you. I think that looking through a viewfinder hones the experience. Sometimes it removes distractions, and it lets you just be one with the subject. Sometimes.
So when I go out there with that camera, it allows me to slow down and look at things differently and appreciate every little thing, whether it's a hike on the trails just behind my house or someplace in the mountains like this. It allows me to look at things through this lens that just kind of allows me to pull out the details, experience a little bit deeper, experience a little bit more. And my wife says, I say I have a passion for photography. My wife says I have an obsession. And that's probably because I take a camera everywhere with me. You ask her, she'll tell you, I'll take a camera to the dentist office. Yeah, you never know when you're going to find a great shot.
That's true. That's so true. That's so true. Awesome, man. Thanks, brother.